9 generations, 9 hardcore nuzlocks, 1 quest to prove that vanilla hardcore nuzlocks are still way too easy. On top of the boring standard rules that are on screen right now, I made it so every dev will make the following runs at least a bit less of a cakewalk. Will this ultimate snowball effect eventually get the best of me, or will I easily beat 9 hardcore nuzlocks in a row? This is the Hardcore Nuzlocke Gauntlet. Now that we're nearing the halfway point of this gauntlet, the death counter has sadly gone into double digits, so I have my work cut out for me in this run. Since I already spun the wheel for 11 eliminated encounters directly after finishing Pokemon Platinum, I could immediately get started with hopefully not losing. The starter that would help me reach that goal for this run was Tepig, mainly because of Lenora and Berg, but also because fire types are just hard to come by in general. It managed to beat both Charon's and Bianca's starter Pokemon, but we'd have to face those many more times in this run. It's so bad that we're actually gonna alternate encounters and rival battles for quite a bit, since after catching a Patriot on Route 1, I got introduced to the third rival, N. His level 7 Purloin didn't pose a threat though, so I could quickly pick up a Lillipup on the next route before reuniting with Bianca for our second battle. Patriot could easily two-shot both of her Pokemon, so moving on. This brought me to Striaton City, home of the first gym, but I wasn't ready to take it on just yet. I would have to face a water type, and since this is a game intended for 10-year-olds, I could grab a Pansage in the Dream Yard to cover for that. But of course, before tackling the gym leader, I had to battle Charon so he didn't feel left out. Should have just become a gym leader if he wanted to battle all the time, maybe then he would actually be a threat. Although Crest wasn't any issue either. Tepig took down the Lillipup with the help of a burn, and Pansage won the Elemental Monkey Showdown to get me the Trio badge. Charon thought the whole alternating encounters and rival battle shtick was getting a bit boring, so he decided to mix it up by battling me before I could even get a single new encounter. At least it was an easy fight, but I could yet again only catch a single Pokemon before meeting him in battle again, although this time against a common enemy of Team Plasma. Still, none of the battles up until this point are difficult at all, so it's time to get back to encounters. And finally, I have 3 routes before the next rival fight. Fuck. I did get a Roggenrola and Wellspring Cave, but missing out on a potential fighting type in Pinwheel Forest could be annoying for Lenora. There was still one fighting type available for me though, by evolving Tepig into Pignite. Alongside that, my Lillipup evolved into Herdier, and with these upgrades it was time to take on N. At this point, all his Pokemon were still in their first stage, with no Sigilyph on the team just yet, so this fight wasn't an issue, but Lenora was definitely a bit trickier. Even though my Roggenrola didn't take damage for the first 5 turns, that luck turned around with some flinches, misses, crits, and few Rock Blast hits, so I eventually was forced to switch it out for my Watchog. It dodged a bite because of a sand attack from earlier and finished off the Herdier with a crunch, but then came in Lenora's Watchog. This could now use a double power retaliate, but that's why I came prepared with Detect to block it. This eliminated the biggest threat here, and even though the rest of the fight was a bit scuffed, I eventually got the victory. Surprisingly, there were no rival fights before the next gym, just some lame Team Plasma goons, so the only important things were Pansage evolving into Simsage and Pidove into Tranquil, which I immediately got to use against Berg. Pignite easily took care of his first 2 Pokemon, and Tranquil swooped in for the kill on the Leavanny. I had also picked up the Eviolite, which can boost the defensive of a Pokemon that can still evolve by 50%, making Tranquil a defensive beast considering it also has Roost for recovery. Bianca didn't stand a chance against it, and although I actually needed to swap my Pokemon around against Charon, it was yet another deathless victory. This gave me access to the Desert Resort. I caught a Scraggy in the open and a Sandow in the Relic Castle, but that wasn't the only Pokemon I could get here, since there was an NPC that could give you a fossil. Not this one though, this is just a random trainer, and oh god, I'm getting destroyed. I hate Sigilyph. It's just such a strong Pokemon compared to your own team at this point in the game, and I had nothing to handle both its stab attacks. My only hope was that Roggenrola either activated its Quick Claw or survived one Psybeam, and sadly that was not the case. Tranquil managed to finish it off, but still, that hurts. And all of that for a fossil Pokemon that wouldn't be that helpful anyways. To make it even worse, I then immediately had to battle N, who also had a Sigilift by now. Before that though, his Darumaka was being incredibly rude. It first did over half to Big Knight with a critical Fire Punch, then survived Herdier's Dig and almost killed it with Fire Punch plus burn damage. Luckily Tranquil managed to clean up this mess, and after my Simisage took care of the Scraggy, I had to deal with whatever biblically accurate Angel Demon thing Sigilift is supposed to be. I did have the Dark-type Sandal on the team now, but despite that, I still had to risk 2 critical air cutters which have increased crit rates, so this was definitely not the cleanest win I could have gotten, but I'll take it. Still, I was quite salty about the Rock and Roll death, and this kinda carried over to the Elisa fight. My plan was to boost Herdier's attack with Work Up while taking hits because of the Eviolite, and then just do damage. The issue was that Elisa's and Molga were doing around a quarter of my HP, and after finishing off the first one, Herdier leveled up, getting a bit more HP and special defense. This brought it to just over a quarter of its max HP, and because I was kinda playing on Salt, I decided to risk the crit or potential high roll, and Herdier did not survive. That was definitely my fault, but let's first finish this gym fight and then everyone can yell at me. Big Knight 2-shot the remaining Emolga, and although it did get paralyzed by static, that didn't matter since I had Sandal to get the dub against Zebstrika with Dig. Sharon caught me off guard with yet another rival battle since I'm not too familiar with the original Pokemon Black and White, more with the sequels, but I easily took care of his team so I could move on to Driftville City. I caught a Ducklet at the Fancy Bridge, dealing at Route 6, and went back to Nacrene City to revive my Tortuga Fossil. Cold Storage was one of the eliminated encounters, so let's move on to Team Plasma, who were complete pushovers, so let's move on to Clay. After switching around a couple times to scout out what his Krokorok would do, I brought in my Simisage at the perfect time to activate my Trap card. Clay used Swagger, raising my attack by 2 stages, and the confusion that comes with it got healed by my Held Person Berry, so I was fully set up to sweep. Seed Bomb against Krokorok, Dig against Excadrill, and one more Seed Bomb against Palpitoad let me one-shot all of Clay's Pokemon. A couple things happened after this gym battle. Oh my god, who would have guessed things are happening? It's not like we're only halfway through the game basically, so of course things are gonna happen. Sandal became somewhat useful by evolving into Krokorok, and Tranquil became its final form on Pheasant before I yet again got sucker punched by one of my rivals, this time Bianca. It's not really an issue since all the rivals in this game suck anyways, but I gotta be honest, it's definitely annoying. With the Flying Gym up next, I wanted an electric type for the team, and although I lost my Charge Stone Cave privileges, I managed to get one on Route 7, and this Wild Zebstrika would be my savior. Unfortunately, not all Wild Zebstrika were as nice to me. While traveling back from the Celestial Tower, where I couldn't even get an encounter, I got into a nasty situation because my Washout failed to run away twice in a row. I didn't want to risk this a third time, so I wanted to switch to Krokorok, and Washout got hit by a pursuit that was just barely enough for the kill. Losing Washout doesn't really matter for this run, but it means one less encounter for the upcoming ones, and that's not great. Let's quickly focus on my own Zebstrika instead and look at the speedy sweep of the Supreme Stefan. Yes, that was a Best Wishes reference, what are you gonna do about it? Anyways, I used Flame Charge once for an unnecessary speed boost while Swoobat boosted special defense, finish it off with a Physical Spark, and clean up the rest of the team with electric moves without taking any damage. This wasn't the only Flame Charge facilitated sweep though, since my starter evolved into an Emboar, and next up was the Ice Gym. Flame Charge 1 shots to Vanillish, 2 shots to Beartig, and 1 Heat Crash on a Cryogonal got me my 7th badge. There is then a bunch of Team Plasma shenanigans, but honestly there really isn't much interesting to talk about besides, yeah, I easily beat up 20 lame grunts, what about it? So let's just go to Appaloosa City. Well, okay, it's time for another rival fight. And I am not fully healed. Bianca's Work Up Stoutland already almost killed multiple of my Pokemon, but she got a bit too greedy in the end, so I finished it off with my newly evolved Crocodile, bringing in Serperior. You thought Work Up was scary? This thick serpent decided to set up with Coil, boosting its attack, defense and accuracy. I got pretty unlucky with the fact that there was overruled rain here at the moment, weakening Embor's fire type attacks, so Serperior easily took anything I threw at it, while it actually tripled its attack stat. I managed to get it below 1/3 of its HP, but that also meant its ability Overgrow gave it another 50% damage boost for grass type attacks, So a single Leaf Blade managed to finish me off, and I had no Pokemon that could outspeed it. Fortunately, there was one solution. Unfezant was holding a rocky helmet, which does a bit of damage when the opponent makes contact, so I had to sacrifice yet another Pokemon and then could just barely clean up with Aqua Jet Carracosta. I ended the fight with 4 Pokemon still alive, but 2 deaths against Bianca is too many. I definitely had to rebuild from this in the next stream, and I had actually some pretty decent encounters coming up. Got Rita on Route 9, Axew in Mistralton Cave, Furdish on Route 17, and Klink at the P2 Laboratory. I also threw Gingino on the team for the final gym to prepare a sweep with Tickle and Encore, and it died to a random gym trainer. Not amazing for the bigger picture of the gauntlet of course, but at least I do have a backup strat for Drayden, Feather Dance Swanna. Using this a couple times against Elite Fracture allowed me to then put it to sleep with Shelmet, set up a substitute with Crocodile and get the kill, also giving me an attack boost because of Moxie. Unfortunately, one ground gem boosted dig was still not enough for the one shot on Dradagon, so I managed to break my substitute before going down. This meant I had to swap out against Haxorus, which luckily went for a useless slash on the Jellicent switch, allowing me to burn it using Witherbiss to cut its attack in half. A couple more Feather Dances from Swanna later to drop its attack even more, the burn damage became too much for Haxorus to handle and it fainted, so I got the final badge. Before I could challenge the Elite Four, I had to do a couple more preparations. Evolving those Gothita and Axew from earlier, beating up Charon as payback for the Bianca fight, losing Scrafty to random trading with Griffith's Litigant, nope I'm not elaborating further on that, catching an Alomomola as a replacement, and evolving Klink into Klinklang to round out my Elite Four team. So far this run counts 7 deaths, and with 4 generations left after this I couldn't afford to make this big number get even bigger, so let's see if my preparations for the Pokemon League paid off. They sure did for against Chantal, because she was no issue at all. I got a bit of chip damage on her lead Rodriguez with Klinklang, then switched into Crocodile to set up substitute, and then crunched all the ghost types to death. To double death? Sending them from Hades to Tartarus? No? Moving on. Let's crunch some Pokemon that aren't dead yet, Caitlin's Psychic types. But again, I needed a different Pokemon to deal with her lead, since that Psychic Blob has Focus Blast, which Crocodile would not appreciate, so I relied on Gothitel's Shadow Ball to 2-shot the Reuniclus. But then it was actually time for Captain Crook to sail this ship to victory yet again with a second crunch sweep. But then, things got dark. I don't mean anything died, I just mean I took on the Dark Specialist Grimsley next, which yes, was a very messy fight, but wasn't really an issue because I had a Alomomola. This thing is a monster. I didn't give it any attacking moves, but instead it had Soak to remove stab from the opponents, Toxic to slowly whittle them down, and Wish Protect for some pretty reliable recovery. This easily landed 1v1 Scrafty, and after some quick detours to take down the Crocodile with Haxorus and Bisharp with my own Crocodile, back to stall mode we go to finish the fight against the Life Bard. I didn't want to do the exact same thing against the last Elite Four member Marshall, so once the Guts throw was down, I decided to stall out the rest of this fight with Jellicent instead. Will-O-Wisp let me easily wall all of Marshall's physical fighting types and do a bunch of damage with Hex, so none of the Elite Four members ended up proving any threat at all. But instead of now having to take on one champion, I got to battle both N and Getsis of Team Plasma because apparently they want to do some evil stuff, and that's bad. Still nothing that would justify me using the completely overpowered Reshiram, so in the box it goes. Not that I needed legendary anyways, because move-wise they actually suck quite a bit, which N immediately proved with his garbage exploitable Zekrom. Its only way to get Crocodile was with Giga Impact, which I could easily play around with Substitute, but I still ended up at a bit lower HP than I needed when Zekrom went down, so I had to swap in a Alomomola against the Vanilluxe. I could have simply Toxic stalled here if I didn't get frozen by Blizzard. So instead, I decided to get up 3 shift gears in a substitute with Klinklang to attempt a sweep. I managed to take down the Vanilluxe, the fake opposing Klinklang, and the actual opposing Klinklang. That wacky Klinklang showdown had my gears turning quite a bit, get it? And my substitute did end up going down, so it's time to switch again. Jellicent denied yet another Pokemon of doing decent damage with physical attacks, so to finish off the fight I could go into Haxorus, set up Dragon Dance while barely getting scratched, and 2 attacks finished off N's 2 remaining Pokemon. So that leaves the final battle of the run against Team Plasma leader Getsis, and this lead definitely reminds me of something. Let's set up Substitute and it's time to get crunching. okay, there goes Moxie, so no attack boost from me, and Hydreigon actually landed Focus Blast, so yeah, that's where Captain Crew's ship strands. A bit disappointing, but I'm of course not just letting it go down, since I have a defensive enough team where I can simply bring out Jellicent here, wait for Curse Body to neutralize Hydreigon's strongest attack, and stall it to death. The Bouffalant was a bit scary though, and okay, rude, let's go into Crocodile, and stop it, die, good, okay. So now it's time for the same trick I used against N, burn their defensive physical attacker, switch it to Haxorus, set up Dragon Dance, and voila. Ghetsis is down, and I'm now the new Unova champion. Or was I that already after beating N? I don't know, this ending is weird. Fun, but weird. Just like this video. Stay alive. Nah, just kidding. Yeah, it's outro time. That was a run. Yeah, most deaths happened outside of major battles, which was kinda annoying and goes to show you gotta be careful at all times during nuzlocking, which I personally am not the biggest fan of, but hey, that's how it is. I'm not gonna ask for you to do certain things this time, and instead I wanted to say that I'm not making videos about the remaining generations of this gauntlet. Instead, I'm just immediately gonna move on to making the final video about the entire thing. Why? Well, I think it's just more interesting to do it that way. I'm not really happy anymore with these separate videos, because even though the concept as a whole is kinda interesting, it's still mostly just a bunch of separate standard Hardcore Nuzlocks, which isn't the crazy content I want to make. So anyways, stay tuned for that final video of this Hardcore Nuzlocke Gauntlet, and until then, stay alive.